Welcome to a bonus episode of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. We're recording this late on Wednesday night. Just the basketball game between USC and Arizona just ended. Wildcats win by 15. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. This is not going to be a typical Wildcat Country show, but we did have a special guest and felt it was worthy to put out a second episode this week. Brad Brennan, the brother of Brent Brennan, Arizona's new football coach.
That is a heck of an alliteration right there.
Yeah, good luck. Try saying that 5 times fast. So Brad Brennan is I would say a former star or semi-star Arizona receiver, loyal to the program, was the leading receiver in the 1998 Holiday Bowl, which is arguably Arizona football's most famous game of all time. So we're going to get his thoughts in the second segment. We'll react to it. I think you'll really enjoy the interview, as Shane and I had a chance to sit down with him earlier in the day before the basketball game. But Shane, as always, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and you can get one of those beauties that Shane is drinking out of now. All right, we're going to do one buy or sell question and see where it goes from there. Buy or sell, Shane, Brent Brennan.
Well, if you heard the first episode this week, and by the way, don't get used to the 2 episodes a week. This is a special thing. We both have full-time gigs, but a lot going on this week, so I'm glad we're able to do it. I bought him the first episode this week before it was official. We kind of the news was breaking as we were talking, and I'll certainly buy it now. I mean, he's done everything right. Everything he possibly can done right. He has since he got hired. Hasn't had a chance to get his feet wet very much, but from the reportedly this first meeting with the players went great, did great in front of the media, was a star at the basketball game that just ended, which was just filled with celebrities tonight. Is crazy. He's definitely been embraced by the community already. I just on a personal level, because I got to know him a little bit 3 years ago when it sounded like he was a candidate, and it sounded like he probably was going to get the job until Jedd Fisch just soared to the top of Arizona's wish list, or at least Dr. Robbins' wish list. I got to know him a little bit then, and watching him now, he's Barrett Baker, our friend who knows him and his brother Brad, who we're going to talk to soon, used the word genuine, and I agree with that. I think that I feel like he's not as polished in front of the press. Like, he's more just open and not quite as careful with what he says. He's a little. I almost, you watch some of his videos, I don't know if you saw the Swaggy B thing with Kevin Cummings.
I like that. That was great.
Oh, it was great. He's a little geeky, but like in an awesome way. He's just he's authentic. He is who he is. And I like that. And I think that, especially after you had a guy who was a great salesman, Brent Brennan, you have to be a great salesman, but he believes in what he's selling. And he practices what he preaches. And, you look at, Barrett Baker said, you watch what people say on your way out, and you look at what San Jose State fans and alumni have said about Brent Brennan, nothing but good things, wishing him the best. Sorry to lose him, but obviously understand him taking the position. And then early rumblings, it sounds like that there is at least an opportunity, long way to go, but there's a chance that he's going to be able to retain some of the current players on this team. Several have already entered the transfer portal, some big names that I'm sure are going to be out the door. Some others that may or may not come back. But again, it's very early. He's done everything right so far. And the last thing I'll say is, we've gone back and forth. Well, look at his record at San Jose State. And I'm like, well, number one, yes, because he's had 3 winning seasons in the last 4 years at San Jose State, whereas San Jose State had 3 winning seasons in the previous 30. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, if you want to play that game, and you mentioned this on Twitter earlier, Eric, well, look at Jedd Fisch's record at Arizona.
It's 500. Yeah.
Well, of course, but without that context, you think, well, what is Washington thinking? But then, of course, you look at what he did at Arizona this past year. So you have to take that all into consideration. It's so much more than wins and losses. Is what have you done more recently? What have you done considering the circumstances? And so all those things in mind, Brent Brennan loves the university. He loves the Tucson community. He's a great coach, a great guy. We'll see how he does at a Power 5 school in terms of recruiting, but done everything right so far. And that's all you can ask at this point.
Yeah, you got to buy Brent Brennan. What we've seen from him, he seems like a cool guy. He nailed his press conference. Let's discuss. I gave some thoughts on Brennan. on Twitter. I'm happy about it. We gave some thoughts the other night. I want to touch on just a couple of things I've heard, a couple of things I think, because that's why you're listening to this right now. All right. About players staying or going. So on the Wildcat Authority message board, a 24/7 sports, um, let's just say insider said it's looking good for basically for the Servite trio. But then there are other guys on Twitter. There's a guy on Twitter, I can't remember his name. He's kind of an Arizona varsity insider. He says he put a picture of 3 oranges and said, "Watch for Saturday." Don't know what that means, but seeing that T-Mac and Noah and
Jacob
Manu and
Manu,
were at the
yeah,
game
because Kian
Coleman,
Burnett
yeah.
didn't enter the portal. He's the fourth Servite guy. But yeah, they were all at the basketball game hanging out with Brent Brennan and Kevin Durant, which is pretty cool. And then Jonah Coleman.
But you don't know what's right. We don't
Yeah.
know right now.
No, we don't know.
I would say if I were to put a percentage on it, I would say 60-40 they stay. That'd be my guess. Okay.
There's just so many hurdles including the transfer portal later in the spring as well. So we'll see.
Damon Williams, the 4-star quarterback recruit, is in the portal. I think he's gone, and I think he will be one of Jed's new quarterbacks at Washington. My thought on it, I think it just makes sense. I think a lot of these, if you can keep the guys that were on the team last year and you lose some of the new recruits, fine, but keep the core that just won 10 games together. Simple as that. Kian Burnett really hasn't done a lot. I don't think he's going to Washington because it's not like Jed really played him the last 2 years anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I know Tanner McLaughlin was pretty darn good, but I don't expect to see Jed, I don't know what to make of Kian Burnett there. The other thing that I heard today that was interesting, so Brent Brennan talked about Dwayne Aquina coming back to Arizona. That's looking good.
Mm-hmm.
I threw a couple back channels, and once again, this is a couple sources removed. It sounds like there was some friction between Jed Fish and Dwayne Aquina, which caused him out the door, that there is no love lost there. Don't know specifics, but what I had heard from, a few playing the game telephone, essentially that there, might have been reasons that Aquina, who wanted to retire in Tucson, was suddenly going to Texas. It seems other things that I have read separately that Johnny Nansen also wanted to go his own way. I would be very surprised if you saw him go up to Washington to follow Jed Fish. I also do not expect him to be Arizona's defensive coordinator.
No.
I think our guy John Wall Street, a.k.a. Corey Leff, said that a few days ago. I can't see it. So no. I think I don't know what Brent Brennan's staff is going to be. If you can get Derek Odom from San Jose State, he's a very good defensive coordinator. You can get Alonzo Carter, the running backs coach. He's a very good recruiter. You're getting one of those seems likely. One of them I feel like will be the new head coach over there. I don't know which one.
Yeah, that could be.
But if you could get both, that's a home run. With that said, Brennan has to build this staff very soon, Shane. We have to see an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and position coaches by the weekend.
I'm sure he's already working on it. You're absolutely right. And Jed brought a lot of his staff with him to Washington. We were hoping that Kevin Cummings may stick around, but they announced him as the wide receivers coach at Washington. Now, it's interesting, though, that if you look at Brent Brennan's contract, the average salary per year is $2.6 million, which is quite a bit less than what Jed Fish was set to make.
Well, it's actually 3.1 with incentives.
Okay, with incentives, 3.1, yeah. Still less than what Jed was making, definitely was set to make if he had signed that contract extension. But the pool for assistants is like $4.5 million, which is
it's $4.25,
okay,
which is up $500,000 over where it was under Fish,
which is fantastic. And so that
it's low comparatively.
Well, it's still
an upgrade,
better, and it's something that Jed, before he bolted for Washington, noted was an area of need. We need to be able to pay assistants and retain assistants, and Brent Brennan will have the opportunity to bring some pretty good assistants in with that pool of money. So that's a positive, and I'm sure that's one thing that Brent Brennan and Jed Fish had in common is like we need that extra money for assistants. And then as far as the transfer portal, it's interesting to see. I wouldn't read too much into it. Jonah Coleman entered the transfer portal. He was at the game hanging out with his teammates and Brent Brennan at the basketball game. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. He's probably sticking around Tucson until he finds another place to go, which could be, who knows, it could be Washington, because I know he had a close relationship with Scotty Graham. But yeah, you had a handful of big names enter the transfer portal. Damon Williams ultimately may be the biggest to this point. Certainly Jonah Coleman as well. Raymond Polito, offensive lineman, entered the portal. And Ephesians Pricelock already had. So you're going to lose some guys. Depth is probably going to be an issue, especially this late in the game for next season. But if Brent Brennan can hit the ground running, and I don't think a Big 12 championship is in play at this point, but certainly if you can go 500 or better, get that momentum going a little bit.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you here.
Okay.
If Fafita and McMillan and Manu stay, Arizona will keep a lot of their big core. I still think, regardless, assuming those three stay, I think a lot of the team, the majority of those guys will stay. I think you're still looking at a top 25 team.
Maybe borderline top 25, but I would have put them at even money with Utah to win the Big 12 a couple weeks ago. Now I'm not putting them there. That's all I'm saying.
No, it's a lot of pressure on Brennan too.
Yeah.
But if you keep Fafita and you keep McMillan and you keep Manu, so you keep your leader on defense and your two leaders on offense, right there, Shane, not many people have, three players that are that, who knows? This could all fall apart and we could be sulking in the next few weeks. Who knows what reports are true and what reports are not? By all accounts right now, the fact that those guys were at the game with Brent Brennan was there. They were at the game together, including Jonah Coleman, who by all accounts is going to follow Scotty Graham to Washington. Yeah. It seems like a good sign.
Sure. It's not a bad sign.
No, we might be having a podcast in a week or two saying, oh my God, this team is, ASU level in the Big 12. As of right now, I would lean towards them staying, just reading the tea leaves, and therefore Arizona being a preseason top 20, 25 team, if that were the case. That's as it stands today.
Yeah, well, after my Twitter thread where I said my gut feeling was that Jedd Fisch was going to stay, I'm out of the prediction business for now. But it's certainly, I know, but it's certainly a positive development, and the reports were that he nailed that initial meeting with the players, but they're going to get wooed by other schools, and NIL money is going to be thrown around, and there's another transfer portal coming up later in the year before the season starts. So there's in terms of the current roster, there's so many landmines to avoid, and so in order to get off to a good start. So and eventually, look, Brent Brennan's and his staff are going to have to walk on their own 2 feet and bring in their own guys, and it's still an unknown, just like it was with Jedd Fisch. Really, it's an unknown how well they're going to be able to recruit, because Brent Brennan hasn't had, this is his first Power 5 or Power 4 now job. So you just don't know. But I think that based on what everyone said about him, and I remember watching this video when Arizona was interested in Brent Brennan the first time around, where like the players were like hoisting him up and just like celebrating after winning the Mountain West Championship. People love playing for him, and that really matters. And I think that the players and alumni who have played for him and do play for him will be his best ambassadors in that regard, and will help in terms of recruiting as well.
All right. So one other point that I want to make, those guys tonight, Fafita, McMillan, Manu, and Coleman, were sitting very nearby Humberto Lopez, who is a local Tucson real estate developer and big money. And the Arizona Daily Star has reported, his involvement, that he was going to be behind the Jedd Fisch extension. I think Mr. Lopez might be a very key factor here, and I think he wants to see the football team succeed. So I just would theorize that if these guys were to stay, you can thank Mr. Lopez for his investment in the program, more so than just it is today. I'll say that. And yeah. And
my last thing is I wanted to say is that it sounded like the making this an easy decision. Part of what made this an easy decision to hire Brent Brennan was that the boosters were all on board, from what it sounds like, on this hire, and that matters even more now than it did before, because you have the NIL money along with money for to hire the head coach and for the assistant coach and pool and incentives and everything. So that matters more than it ever has, and I think that's what made it really easy. I think that he was probably Dave Hickey's number one guy before, and he was again. So that certainly helped. But when all the boosters, who I'm sure Arizona was in contact with as they were desperately trying to retain Jedd Fisch, said this is a great situation. Other than retaining Jedd Fisch, this is the best possible scenario. Go ahead and get him. It was an easy call.
All right, let's hear from Brad Brennan. Shane and I had a really fun sit down with him earlier today. And one cool thing, when we got on the call with with Brad Brennan, he was walking around the Lowell Stevens football facility, and he ran into Brandon Sanders, and he put Brandon on. They were teammates together, and so they put him on. I think they were teammates together. And he put him on the screen to say hi to Shane and I. Very, very cool. We haven't had Brandon on in a long time. Hope to do so. I'm sure he's going to continue to play a role on Brent Brennan's staff. So it was cool to see that. But hope you guys enjoy the Brad Brennan interview, and we'll chat a little bit afterwards here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, what a treat for a bonus episode in middle of the week. It's not every day you happen to get a former U of A letter winner. Oh, he, by the way, scored a go-ahead touchdown in the 98 Holiday Bowl. Oh, by the way, he's the brother of our new head coach, the first family at Arizona football, Brad Brennan. Thanks so much for, I know you're in Tucson, for a business trip you had mentioned, but a lot of crazy things have gone on. Thanks so much for joining us. What has the last, let's say, 72 hours been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, a whirlwind, I guess, is kind of, how you best explain it. Obviously things happen so fast in this profession, and even more so in today's world, I think, with just all the transfer portal stuff and having to have your coach in place, before just everything kind of implodes, in those situations. So, my brother and I always talking about what's going to happen, where was this job when it was coming up, when Jedd left, and kind of all those dominoes fell in the right place. And then just trying to figure out support, for Brent. I played here, obviously, and have a lot of my old teammates, and this is a real brotherhood here. I don't know that it's like this at every university. But all those guys rallying around and reaching out to me saying, "Hey, is your brother interested?" Again, this time around. And I thought that was really cool. And so a whirlwind with that, just trying to get everybody, support train going, with Brent a little bit and seeing what the real opportunity was for him.
Yeah, Brett, thanks so much for joining us on such short notice after your brother got hired at Arizona, and congratulations to you and the rest of your family on it. I think I know he's excited, we're excited, and there's been nothing but positive things said about Brent on social media from San Jose State fans, from everyone. Just give us a brother's perspective. What kind of guy on a personal level is Arizona getting with Brent Brennan?
Yeah, I grew up with him, so I know all the ins and outs. I know where all the skeletons are at. But I think he's been coaching me my whole life, and whether I knew it or not, growing up, he's always been in a coach's role. In fact, our dad traveled a lot, right? So he was kind of the one, a lot of times, dragging us around, getting balls in our hands, and playing with, him and his buddies that were bigger than us and beating us up. So I think that he's always been kind of that guy that's like always taking the lead, and he's made sure that everyone is getting treated the right way. We have a younger brother, so as you can imagine, we're only 13 months apart, my younger brother, so we used to beat the crap out of each other. And Brent would be the one that would come in and manage it all, and so I think he's always been had a great way to like deal with situations, deal with, issues that come up, and also making sure that everybody, is feeling the energy, feeling, that they're a part of something. And so he's always just been that role, I think, for us as siblings, for sure.
Yeah, I think the term destination job is thrown out a bit too loosely in college sports, especially with so much movement at the head coaching position in college football, including at Arizona, obviously. But for Brent himself, do you think this could truly be a final landing spot for him if given that opportunity? Does he see that job this way?
Yeah. I don't think Brent's, if you look at his track record, he's never been a guy that's just bounced. I think that, it's hard to really do it the way he likes to do it if you are going to bounce, right? It's we as a family, I think, and Brent in particular, just treat relationships, in a really serious manner. We invest in those relationships. We take time in those relationships, and those things don't happen, 6 months, a year, 2 years, right? And I think that's why he has been very loyal and has stayed at these different schools over these years. I know that he had really a lot to prove at San Jose State. That place can be very difficult with a lot of the, some of the limited resources they have. But he really wanted to make a difference there. Our dad played there, so there was probably some incentive that way as well. But at the same time, like, he wants to stay somewhere for a long time everywhere he goes. And I see this, and he hasn't said this, but I could see this. They have success here. I don't see him ever leaving. I think that that's something that is very rare in this profession, but his values are different than some.
Yeah, let's talk about those values. I mean, what kind of a guy is Brent Brennan? He nailed the press conference. Apparently, he's nailed it with players. We already are seeing certain players say that they're coming back. Backup quarterback Braden Dorman, just before Shane and I are recording this with you, said he was in the transfer portal 2 days ago. Now he says, I'm with Coach, Brennan, I'm back. What kind of guy is your brother behind, not in front of cameras?
Yeah, I think what you see is what you get. And I think that, like, people don't, see one thing and they're getting, all the bullshit mixed in there. He's real. And I think that that's, a very rare trait in today's world. It's kind of like, hey, I'm going to say this because it's going to help me out or make the situation look better. But you don't have all the hard stuff. Brent talked a lot about Coach Tomey, and I think Coach Tomey was a master. Even when we were playing here, like, he made us sit down with our teammates and talk about hard stuff, right? And that's where, like, I think a lot of the pros or the old players there, like, they'll talk about those were like our biggest bonding moments, right? Now these guys don't know Brent yet. Some of them do. Actually, one of his old recruits from San Jose State's actually was just walked by, but they have like I think a really special way that he connects with them that you don't always see in a head coach's role. Maybe sometimes more like on a position level, but the head coach, that kind of is out there trying to manage everything, can kind of get lost in the shuffle of like the day to day of just managing, a team. But Brent, I think, puts in extra time to really get to know these kids, get to know their parents and their families, and that stuff goes a long way. I mean, everyone feels the love, everyone feels the bond, and I think that makes your team just that much stronger.
A few years ago, Shane and I when we started this podcast, we were a few months into it, and Kevin Sumlin was let go, and we were big on the Brent bandwagon. Hey, you need to hire this guy, and then out of nowhere, Jed was hired. We're like, who is this? What's going on here? So now it just feels right. Do you think, Brent always, after that didn't happen, do you think he just kind of closed the door on Arizona, or did he just say, maybe one day it'll all work out? Do you have any insight there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it hurt. I don't think that that's a surprise to anyone when nobody likes rejection, right? And nobody likes, it's not just like a rejection. It's like one-on-one, and you're not the guy, right? And I think that that's really hard to swallow a little bit. But like, and I think Brent mentioned this a little bit today, like, if they aren't successful at San Jose State, like, nothing is a chance, right? Past that. And not to say that wasn't a great gig for him in a long-term job that he could have stayed there. But I think that, like, he just knew that he had to just go back and do what he does best. And I think that because he has such a special bond with his teammates and the team, that they have to, like, he's got to give them a fair shake, right? It's not like you're going to go, half-ass at it just because it didn't work out, and you might not think that chance is ever going to come again. Like, those are your guys, that's your team. Like, you go back and you handle business, and I think he always does that.
I think Brad sent in the last 24 hours that those who are UA fans are maybe skeptical about the hire or feeling better about it just for a number of reasons, because they've seen Brent, they've heard from him already, and I think it's simplistic to look and say, well, he was about below 500 as a head coach at San Jose State. He's had a winning season 3 of his last 4 years there, which I think 3 of the previous 30 they had winning seasons there. Can you just talk about how difficult it is to win at San Jose State and the job that he did there?
Yeah, I think that's something that goes, it kind of gets pushed under, a little bit, where you don't realize, how hard it can be there. They always have to play a monster offseason schedule, right? Because of the money, which, you're starting to get into, 3 games of that and some big travel games, because you usually don't get those teams at home, right? Because they're paying you. And by season time, you're beat up because you've taken, a bunch of hits from, guys that are pushing out NIL money, all these kids, right? And so the discrepancy between those teams can be a little bit different. So I know that was always a challenge. And then the fact that they just, whether it's, having to play, I think a few years ago they had to play Hawaii like three times in a row. And so there's just some things that are different there that, some of the other schools might not have as many challenges. But I think they did the best that they possibly could with their resources. And I think like that alone is what makes Brent so excited. Like, the sky's the limit here, right? I mean, I think he's blown away by the support and the facilities and everything that they've done to upgrade this program. And Jed and his staff, they were a big part of that too. And so I think we're seeing like a big wave in the right direction. And hopefully we can keep a lot of the guys here and make this sustainable so that they can, piggyback off of a great season last year and continue success for the long term. Like, all of my old teammates, they don't want this roller coaster, man. Like that roller coaster thing of up and down seasons. No, they want long-term success here. And knowing my brother, that's what they're going to do.
And our guy Barrett had nothing but great things to say about you and Coach Brennan. And I know he's genuinely excited about the hire as well. I want to talk a little bit about you and your time at Arizona, Brad, because Brent mentioned during his press conference the story of how you came to Arizona. There was a phone call during a family vacation and said, basically we're told, if you're on campus tomorrow, we'll give you a shot. Can you just go through that whole process with us?
Yeah, I had come basically I was looking at Arizona and Colorado. Brent's receiver coach was Rick Neuheisel from Arizona, or from UCLA, excuse me. And he was the head coach at Colorado. And then his offensive coordinator was Homer Smith, who was the offensive coordinator here. So I was like, look, I'm a walk on. I think I can play, but I got to try and get a foot in the door somewhere, right? Give me a little edge. And so decided to come to Arizona, and I met with Homer Smith. He said, sorry, we don't have a spot for you in preseason camp. And I kept sending him, a message, a letter basically saying, hey, can I come to camp? Finally, the day before, we were on family vacation up like near Lake Tahoe or something. I had a buddy from out of town. He was from Boston. He's in town with us. And they said, hey, if you can get here by tomorrow, we got a spot for you. So I told my buddy, hey, man, you can figure it out with my family. I got to go. And it was incredible. I think having that time at camp before the start of the year, with all the veterans was such a big deal for me in my development. I had guys like Richard Dice, who love him, but he was a motherfucker, excuse my language, because he beat the crap out of me as a young buck. And I didn't totally understand it then because we're same position. I'm like, man, I thought this was like the thing, him and Ricky, Rodney Williams. And so at the time I was like, I didn't get it, but that was a very like instrumental part of kind of my, starting a base and starting to understand, okay, this is real deal sports. Like, let's figure it out.
Yeah, let me ask you one more question. I'll let Eric ask you about the Holiday Bowl in the '98 season. Speaking of Richard Dice, he's a kind of a legend for in the ASU U of A rivalry, essentially playing on one leg and beating ASU with a on one leg. And then Brent mentioned during his press conference today that a photo he had in his office of you sitting on the goalposts after beating ASU. It was shared on social media as soon as he mentioned it. Can you tell us just how important that rivalry is to you? And does Brent embrace the importance of winning that game as much as you and Barrett and others from that era do?
Yeah. Yeah, that rivalry is a monster. I think if you're from the East Coast, you don't get it. The proximity to schools. When I was playing here, my sister was at ASU, and we always joked that she didn't get into U of A. So it was always a fun little joke we had with her. But on a more serious note, I mean, that thing is like, I was at Oregon State a couple of years, right? And Oregon and Oregon State, like, they don't like each other, but they kind of play nice a little bit, I think, where this one is always very contentious, right? The rivalry there, unmatched, and you just remember those games, so vividly. The first when I was a freshman, I think we lost was when they had Plummer, and I think we took a real beating that year. And that one just stung, and I think you never forget that. And so every year after that is really kind of you want to get him back. So Dice was a great example. I mean, he had legendary moments against them with his knee and pointing at his knee and then pointing at the crowd and so it was really
and telling the crowd that they were number one. If I remember.
That's right, number one. Yeah, with the special finger. And so those things are like burned in your memory. And then with Brent, especially some of those years. I don't know if someone sent a video of us like after the game in the actual stands. They like picked me up into the stands. And I was, celebrating with my younger brother was right there, my grandparents, like my brother Brent was there. I mean, it was wild.
They shared that video with on social media about an hour ago and said, "Hey, Arizona, this is your coach." And they said,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, even back then, and from that video, I mean, you see the passion, enthusiasm. I mean, he's an enthusiasm guy. I mean, when you see him on the sideline too, he's and I think Dave said it today. Just he's a glass half full guy, right? I mean, when things are down, like he's not really worried about that. He's full in, like locked in, like keep the positive energy. Things are going to go our way. Someone's going to make a play, and I think a lot of that stems from Coach Tomey as well.
So we talk about the '98 Holiday Bowl. Shane alluded to it. You were the leading receiver in arguably the most famous Arizona game ever. 2 catches, 78 yards. You had a 15-yard touchdown. First play of the fourth quarter. That's been circulating on social media in the last last day or so. I don't know if you've seen that. But I went to this Nebraska website, and the first picture that popped up with the box score was you catching the 63-yard play. So what do you remember about that night, and how special was that particular team to you?
Yeah. That year was just, that game really was just a culmination of like one of the best years of my life, right? I mean, you go through this grind of a couple up and down years prior to that, and then you have this like incredible run. We lost to UCLA kind of in the fourth quarter that year, which was unfortunate because like back then it was first year BCS. We might have been in the national championship game, which is kind of crazy to think about. They had lost a makeup game to Miami. Yeah, Edgerrin James went bonkers on them. And they lost that game late in the year because of the hurricane. But so we ended up not going to the Rose Bowl. But that year, there was so much just wrapped up in it and emotions. And I think like people forget like the talent we had on that team. I mean, and even like kind of role player guys that were like doing big things that like, really helped that team. But the bond we had with that team was just, out of control. The game itself, I mean, Jeremy got hurt, McDaniel. So it allowed me to get a little more time than normal. And so I remember the big catch down, it was a wheel route, but Mike Brown, their stud safety guy, he played for the Bears for a long time. He had, unfortunately for him, he took a hard angle outside thinking I was just going to keep pushing the sideline. And so I cut it back up top a little bit, and Keith just dropped a dime. My brother still makes fun of me for getting hawked because I didn't score, and I probably should have. But I didn't see the safety coming from the other side. But incredible moment. And then obviously scoring late Scoring in any bowl game or any game really is incredible. But like to do it on that stage, I had like 100+ people there in the family, a lot of family from San Diego, so it was incredibly special against Nebraska too, which is always a national team.
Yeah, and by the way, which I did not realize, actually, the quarterback you guys went up against won a Heisman Trophy a few years later in Eric Crouch. That was a young
That's
Eric Crouch, which you don't think about in that game, and I definitely did not know that till I checked the box score. All right, last question for you. Have you been a part of some of the player get-togethers, the old player get-togethers under Coach Fish, and do you think your brother will continue that policy of bringing everyone back for certain occasions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started off when my brother was in that path. Like Brandon Sanders and a bunch of the old guys, said, "Hey, let's get everybody back together. They need to make the right hire at this time." And this was when before Jed got the job, right? Which I thought was the total right call, right? And so what it did was it created this like amazing energy, amazing like everybody come back to the program. Let's support this the right way, how it should be done, but kind of had gone along the wayside, I think, with some of those prior regimes. And so, yes, I was a part of a bunch of those calls. Obviously, very disappointed when it didn't go my brother's way, but still, like always wanted to keep tabs on what was going on. Brandon's incredible, man. Like he's always been trying to keep everybody in the loop. Like to have like an anchor there that's really kind of rallying the troops and doing sometimes like the annoying job of pinging guys all the time. Like some guys don't like that. Brandon's been, taking that ownership of that and kept it going. So I'm hopeful that my brother will do some stuff like that. I mean, if you guys know anything about my brother, he's all about family and people and bringing people together. And so I think that, he'll definitely have some sort of version of that. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but I know he loves Brandon. And so we'll probably leave some of that stuff up to him as well.
Brad, thanks so much on short notice for joining us. It's been a crazy week. Happened to be in Tucson randomly, but it all worked out. Enjoy yourself at the game tonight. And thanks so much for hanging out with Shane and I.
Of course. You guys are awesome. Hope to meet you guys in person here soon and really appreciate it. Let's bear down.
Yeah, really cool to catch up with Brad Brennan. Cool guy. First time he's ever been on Wildcat Country with us in the 3.5 years we've been doing this, Shane. And just really, I mean, there's the memories from obviously the Holiday Bowl and the 98 season were cool, but just finding out about his brother, I mean, by all accounts, Arizona nailed this hire.
Yeah, and like you said before the segment started, it was fun just because he was walking around trying to find a quiet place to chat with us, and it was a very last minute request. I asked Barrett, "Hey, can you give us Brad's number?" And Brad was happy to do it, and we appreciate it. Yeah. And then we ran. As he's going through the Lowell Stevens facility, he runs into Brandon Sanders and helps him find a place where he can go chat with us. And then, we didn't ask him about it, but he did mention there was a San Jose State commit that was on campus as well. So interesting. We'll have to see how things shake out, but it's awesome family. And Brad and Brent seem quite a bit different. I'm sure they had some fun growing up together and were very competitive with each other, but I tweeted this out. I'm so happy for Brent and his family, regardless of how everything turns out. I'm sure it was very disappointing to be turned down for that job when it probably felt like he was gonna get it 3 years ago, and now to 3 years later, it's amazing that like the second time around that opportunity was still there for everyone. And I'm glad it worked out, and hopefully it'll work out for Arizona football.
As an Arizona football fan, we're going to have to go through these periods when Arizona football is good, other teams are going to poach players until the NCAA or whatever governing body does something about it. This is what we're going to see. But I think as far as a coach leaving, taking the entire staff with him and trying to pillage the roster, I think this is the last time we're going to see that for a long time for Arizona football. Like Brent Brennan's going to get a fair shot. And, as Brad said, like could be, as you asked, Shane, a destination job for him long term. So really something to keep an eye on there. I just want to touch on the basketball game tonight. Arizona won by 15 against USC. I don't think that they played especially great. USC was missing arguably their three best players. And still, I mean, not that the game was ever in jeopardy, because it wasn't in the second half.
Still got within 10 with about 2 minutes left. It's just like USC kept hanging around. Arizona went on a run, but they didn't really go on a run that was going to put them up 20, 25 points. USC kept hanging around, and so a little concerning there. Tommy Lloyd talked about possibly tinkering with the lineup, and he didn't really, except he did start Jaden Bradley in the second half, which I saw a stat the other day that Arizona's offensive efficiency with Jaden Bradley over the season actually is quite a bit better than with Kylan Boswell on the floor. And it's kind of a limited sample size. And I remember it had to be about a month ago, maybe even longer, that Tommy Lloyd mentioned that Jaden Bradley was dealing with a turf toe injury. And I don't know if that's something that's lingering all season, but if he's getting healthier and getting better, that could be a big part of Arizona's success. But still a little uninspired. I think it's one of those games where they expected to come home and just kind of ride the crowd momentum to a win against a team that was injury depleted, and they did. And it was like a who's who there at the game with Kevin Durant and Brent Brennan and Miles Simon and Kadeem Carey and all the Arizona football players. So it was all right. I kind of feel like basketball, even during the game, was kind of a second fiddle to the football news. And UCLA, for those who didn't see it, UCLA was down 13 at halftime to ASU. They came back and they pulled out a win. ASU got called for 4 technical fouls in the second half, and you could probably guess how Bobby Hurley felt about that after the game. He was a little peeved, as he tends to get. So, maybe UCLA is getting a little momentum, and they could give Arizona a harder time than we expect. But
I want to touch on 2 things real fast.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Umar Ballo. He can't make free throws. 4 for 10 again tonight. He's shooting like 40%.
It's so weird. He was a 70% free throw shooter his first year at Arizona, and he's just regressed since then every single year.
This is a severe problem for Arizona because late in the game, in a close game, you can't keep him in.
Nope.
You have to take him out. Now, Krivas is playing well enough and shoots the ball, from the free throw line well enough. That's fine, but he's still raw. I mean, Ballo, if I'm Tommy Lloyd, I'm making him shoot 200 free throws a day because you have to fix this.
Yeah.
Like this has to be a fixable thing and get him back to the 60% range. You can't be shooting 40% problem. And Boswell tonight did not shoot the ball terribly well. He was 4 of 12 at 11 points. But one thing I noticed, so in Arizona's losses this year, now let's throw out the FAU game because that was 96, 95,
94, something like that.
Yeah, 96, 95. Yeah, he had 12 points in that game. In Arizona's other 3 losses, he had 6, 5, and 0 points. That's 11 points combined in 3 games. When Kylan Boswell doesn't score double digits in every game that Arizona has, not quite. I mean, it's not 100%, but there is a trend there. Yeah, Boswell scoring double digits helps.
Isn't it interesting that Arizona seems to have survived Caleb Love's bad games, like against Duke or against Michigan State? He didn't shoot especially well, and Arizona still won those games. But when Kylan Boswell doesn't play well, they really struggle. So he could be a big key to a tournament run. He doesn't necessarily have to be their leading scorer, but he has to show up, like you said. The other thing is, Arizona's free throw shooting is a concern. It's one of the reasons they lost to Washington State. I did see a stat though that in terms of like they call it clutch free throw shooting, like late in games, Arizona's toward the top in terms of late free throw shooting, and that's because like you said, Tommy Lloyd will take Umar Ballo out of the game in those situations, like especially when Arizona's got a lead, 3 to 5 points with a minute left, and they'll try to get the ball to Caleb Love or Pella Larson, who are very clutch free throw shooters. So in those situations, I'm not as concerned because Lloyd is just going to take out Ballo for that reason. But
it's a shame that he has to.
Yeah, no, it is. And well, you remember back in the Alabama game where Nate Oates tried the little hack-a-shack at the end of the first half, and Ballo made both of those free throws. But yeah, it's
a problem.
It could be the difference. It could be the difference between a Final Four appearance and an early first round exit. If you shoot, say, 13 of 24 from the line, and your opponent goes 20 of 24, that could be the difference in a close game. And I just don't know if there's anything that really can be done about that.
If there was a positive tonight, offensive rebounding. Arizona, of their 47 rebounds, 21 on the offensive side. That is good to see, but still not as good of an effort as I expected. I wanted to see this team blow the doors off a depleted USC team, and they honestly didn't do that. So I think, as you said, Shane, UCLA with some momentum. It's a little I don't think they're going to lose, but it's a little more concerning than it should be.
I bet you that's going to be a closer game than we would like. And it seemed, the whole cliche, throw the records out. It always has a big game feel when Arizona and UCLA play. And I know UCLA's been struggling. I mean, they got beat down by almost 50 points against Utah. And so ASU should be a little embarrassed if they lost to UCLA, even with all their technical fouls. But I think Arizona is going to be in a bigger battle than they probably expect. I have a bad feeling this is going to be way too close with a few minutes left. I hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong a lot. That's good news. I was wrong about the Jedd Fisch situation, so maybe I'll be wrong about this. But I just have this feeling that UCLA is going to make this a really interesting game. I think Arizona wins, but I'm not as confident they win by double digits as I was a few days ago.
All right, let me give you one last stat. I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. Last year, between December 31st and January 25th, UConn, who ended up winning the national championship, lost 6 of 8 games. They then got hot, went on a run. This happens in January.
Yeah.
Teams you don't want to peak now, because we've seen Arizona teams peak now. And then what happens later? We saw, Arizona looked great last January. UConn figured it out, went on to win a national championship. Just remember that before we go any further. Anyways, Shane and I will be back probably early next week, maybe like a Tuesday, somewhere in that ballpark, record the next Wildcat Country. As always, check us out on Twitter, aka X. We'll be posting a bunch of stuff. Shane always retweets some great stuff on the Cat Country AZ account. So want to thank Brad Brennan for joining us. Great to catch up with him for the first time. Great insight on his brother. For Shane Dale, I am Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and especially now, bear down.